One of the biggest challenges that we've had talking with companies, or one of the biggest challenges companies have, I should say, when do we need to replace something? When is it time to upgrade? And unfortunately, that's a rolling question, because whatever your answer is today, you're going to be asked the same question 6 months or a year from now, because nothing stays the same. Everything changes. So that's kind of where this conversation had come from. How can we help? This is our shameless advertising. We are the IT department for small, medium companies. So when it comes to companies in terms of their questions, in terms of their strategies moving forward, all that kind of thing, we want to be that primary resource. And again, one of the big challenges we've seen with our customers when they come on board with us is that they are not used to dealing with an IT company that actually wants to learn about what they do and what their issues are and incorporate that into the solution. There's a lot of, when your favorite tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You know, yes, here's our solution for you. By the way, what do you do? You know, so we do all this and we're wonderful and it's great and blah, blah, blah. Okay, and so what is obsolete? Unfortunately, there is no real good answer to that question, especially when you're talking about IT infrastructure and, you know, all that. It's no longer used. Yeah, we have that, but it no longer serves the purpose. Out of date, as we're going to see, that can mean anything in IT. Can't perform the tasks. And then finally, and this is a big problem with companies, it's not what the consultant is selling. Okay, as in we come in, you know, out of nowhere and we want to sell you the latest stuff because, well, then you'll buy it and we'll make money, as opposed to it actually helps the business. So there's a lot, and we do probably about half of our business is with manufacturing companies. Manufacturing companies have a very different opinion about what is obsolete than a service-oriented company. Because a service-oriented company has a lot more interaction with their customers out there, as opposed to a manufacturing, which is more or less enclosed. I'm simplifying incredibly. So from a manufacturing standpoint, it works. It does the job. But here's one of the things. By the way, how many are business owners, management kind of thing? Okay. You need to define what this is. If you don't have a good definition of what is obsolete, someone else is going to make that definition for you. All right? And that's going to be in their interest, not in yours. Okay. We're going to focus on infrastructure, the things with the blinking lights. All right? And we're going to look at that today versus, 6, 7 years ago. And just kind of give you an idea of some of the changes and all that. We're going to try real hard here not to get too geeky. So we're not going to get into this many megabits or whatever. All right? If we get into any kind of stuff, just, raise your hand. Ask questions. Okay. This kind of gets into the definition of obsolescence from a geek perspective. It doesn't work. If it works, it's obsolete. Why is that? Because the cutting edge stuff, the stuff that is the newest, the fastest, all that, usually still has growing pains. If you go with the absolute newest thing, you are going to get some really cool added benefits and features, but those benefits and features may come at a price of they don't work quite as well. It's a balancing act. Whereas again, in the manufacturing, the traditionalist, if it doesn't power up, yeah, it's probably obsolete, we need to replace it. We literally are still seeing servers at some of our clients, especially in manufacturing, that are on the 2000 level. So they've been out for 12 years. Think of what has happened in the last 12 years in technology. There have been a couple of changes, you may have read about them. Well, no, because they're not on newspapers anymore because they don't print. But that's an issue. The other issue that we found in a lot of cases is organizations come up with these processes and procedures in order to get something to work. And they've added it step by step, piece by piece. It used to be we just entered it into the system. But then we started having this option. And the system didn't handle this option, so we did this step in an Excel worksheet, took the results, entered it into the system. Well, it turned out that the Excel worksheet had to be approved by our vendor, so we had to, and you have all of these step by step. Anybody remember the name of the guy who did these? Rube Goldberg. Absolutely. I love these. So one of the challenges on this is that companies have added these steps of complexity which made perfectly good sense when that individual step was added. But over the period of time, we're now up to 10, 12, 15 steps. And we have the users who are just, that's the way they do their job. So they're comfortable with that. Okay? But if you took a step back and you look at it and you go, why are you doing it that way? Network, and I'm trying to come up with a good technical word for it, and puberty is the only one I came up with, so. Anybody familiar with the metaphor? Frog in the, yeah.
If you throw a frog into a boiling pot, it'll jump out, but if you put it in there cold and slowly turn up the heat, it'll cook down.
Yeah. So, cool, good. And if we go back to this guy, this person, if they were introduced step by step into this complexity, they're going to think it's okay. Whereas we said, and here's where you brush your teeth. They go, are you nuts? This is part of the challenge. Now, in this case, the reason I bring up the puberty is because sometimes it's not the changes in technology or the increased complications of technology. Sometimes it's the increased complications of the organization. So, peer-to-peer. Now, we have the whole concept of server versus workstation, which, so we go, okay, now we're going to get, no, a server serves. The workstations make requests of the server. The server fulfills those requests. It serves the workstations. Congratulations, you now know what a server and workstation is. That's it. It's that simple. But the problem is that what a lot of organizations start out with is they don't have a server. They don't have a single device that controls, organizes, uses, works with the organization. So you end up with what's called a peer-to-peer network. The peer-to-peer network means that, very simply, we have to manage each individual device individually. So if you have 5 workstations, we have to manage 5 computers. Okay, 5 computers, that's cool. Now we end up with 20 workstations. The stereotypical cat lady didn't start with 20 cats. At some point she probably had 1 or 2, and we thought she just liked cats. But at some point she became the cat lady. Peer-to-peer networks start out with a few workstations. So we need to just monitor and manage those guys. But after a while, you get into a large number of them. And the challenge there is change hurts. Now we're going to move this person from this workstation over to that workstation. Well, whatever we configured over there, and yeah, we can just pick up the computer and move it. But if we're going beyond that, whatever was configured over there has to be configured over here. Whatever the web, the lines of you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, has to be done individually. That's one big issue that happens on the peer-to-peer network, is when companies finally find out we're not that efficient. Because change hurts. Change has to be done everywhere. Or we have no idea how each machine is configured. And every time we have a problem, we have to figure out how to rebuild it. Okay? So we have that peer-to-peer to a domain. And the domain is we have a server that is controlling the behavior of the workstations, what they can or can't do. We still allow the individual, the end user, to do the things that make their environment unique. They can have applications installed specifically for them. They can have their own background, or they can have their own whatever. But the important security things we can control from a single source. Okay? And the domain controller is the server that does that. All right. Some of the other issues we found is that there are some significant changes to how backups were made. Tape backups, file backups. The question to ask is, if critical device broke, what happens to the business And by business, that means what's the cost? If we are down for X number of hours, we cannot do the following functions. What is the cost to the company? What is the cost to our customers? Can we measure that? Business owners, if you can't measure that, measure it. And just walk through. It doesn't have to be down to the nth degree, but have an answer to that question. What's the business cost if something doesn't work? Right? Mark Twain said, and I quote him all the time on this because I think it's very true, it's okay to put all your eggs in one basket, just watch the goddamn basket. Okay? And I think he was absolutely dead on there, is you need to manage and monitor and maintain whatever your critical resources are. If your definition of monitoring it is if it's broken, we'll notice. Not necessarily the best. No centralized administration, peer-to-peer versus a domain. And then critical line of business applications aren't updated. This is a challenge because critical line of business applications this is where the company makes its money. And you have a lot of cases, and a lot of these are economically created because we didn't have the money to update, or it could be that the company that actually provided the software went out of business. There could be a lot of reasons, but what ended up happening, and we found this again, manufacturing, but also service companies as well, is they're running a critical line of business application on an application that hasn't been updated in 10 years. Okay? Has the business changed in 10 years? Has the way the customer interacted with you changed in the past 10 years? And if there's a serious problem with the application, who's going to help you? And in a lot of cases we found out, well, we know this guy, and he used to work for the company that wrote the software. He doesn't work for them anymore, but he's got another job. But we can get a hold of him on the weekends or sometimes in the evening, and he'll help us out. That's kind of like, yes, we have a fire extinguisher. It's in our neighbor's house. And except for the times that they go off for the weekend, we can usually, if we knock on the door and ask if we can borrow their fire extinguisher, they'll probably give it to us. Eek. And again, in some cases, that's fine. We accept that risk, but know the risk. Okay, geek break. If you saw this presentation last year, we didn't have the graphics. So, we've upgraded. Yeah. Anyway, when we talk about hardware, we're going to talk a little bit about what changes have happened to the hardware. And I know from, all right, Steve, you have the good thought to sit away from this group. My wife, on the other hand, is sitting with them. But this is the geeks. I'd say geek squad, but I can't imagine any of you guys in a tie. So the metaphor, I use a library as a metaphor for hardware. When we talk about processors, that's the person who's actually reading and changing the information. When we talk about how much memory we have, that's the space on a table. How many books a processor could be working on, as many books as they can spread out on the table. Bookcases, that's our storage. Other rooms or other servers on the network, other buildings or remote resources. So if you think about it, is if I'm going to be working on information, the books are the information, the more I can just spread out on the table, I have very, very fast access to that. But if I have to get up and either put a book back or bring a book down, that's going to slow me down significantly. Okay? Servers. Core processors. It used to be, again, back in 2005 or so, best you could get was like a couple processors. Now it's ridiculous. I said 8 core. You can have, go ahead, throw out the numbers. 16, 32. You can have as many processors as you want on a single computer. That's essentially how many things that the processor, the brain, the reader can be working on simultaneously. Okay? Maximum you can get was 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now it's, terabytes of RAM. RAM is electronic. Hard drives, you can have unlimited. Now, it used to be, oh, I didn't update this one. Server 2003 was the primary OS. Now it's 2012. So it went from 2003, 2003 R2, 2008, 2008 R2, 2012. Notice that, 2008, then in 2010, 2008 R2. Now it's 2012, 2012 comes out every 2 years. Server operating systems are being upgraded. Keep that in mind, we'll talk about that in a bit. So 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was kind of, well, there was 2000, then there was 2003, then they did an R2 in 2006, then an 8. No, every 2 years. It's the same thing with SQL, same thing with Exchange, same thing with Office, same thing with Windows, the desktop, every 2 years. Okay? This is a biggie, network connectivity. It's how fast this will connect with everything else. One of the key things to keep in mind, especially if you're talking about the cloud at all, is the fact that in your building, even today, used to be, if we were talking back around 2000, 10 megabits, some people 100 megabits. What's a megabit? It's 1,000,000 bits of information. Don't worry about it. Just if you know the number, because the bigger the number, the better it is. So it used to be 10. Back in 2005 or so, the default was really 100. Nowadays, it should be 1,000 or a gigabit. However, when you connect to the cloud connection for, and let's just take a T1, which is, you know, on par with a lot of the cable connections that you can get. Well, for right now, T1 is 1.4 megabits. It's 1.44. Oh, bite me. 1.5 megabits. Get over there. But the point is, and there was one. No, the point is that back in 2000, we were at 10 megabits per second. Internal. External now is 1 to 2. Now, when you go to cable, when you go to any of those guys, we may be talking about, then you have the upload versus the download. The download speed could be, what's a good cable download speed? 10, 12 megabits per second. The upload speed is usually under 2. So you can't do the same kind of traffic using the cloud that you can do internally. And we'll talk about what that means. Okay? And then we've got the most manufacturers continuing support on the hardware. Usually when you purchase a server, I hope, you buy it with at least 3 years of manufacturer support. Because I don't care what anybody tells you, the manufacturer will support the equipment better than any other third party for at least the first 3 years. Usually they will give you the option to renew that for another 3 years. Great, now you got 6 years. Usually they will not go beyond that. So you've got 6 years, and after that, now you can find other third parties that will do it. But the problem is that it will be harder and harder to replace the broken equipment. And it will become more and more expensive. Switches, those are the things that all of the internal cables plug into, kind of the traffic cop for all of the data that's going back and forth. Back again, 10 and 100 megabits per second. Even if your computer could do, you know, a gigabit, didn't mean anything if the switch could. And the other thing, this is important, managed switches. What's a managed switch? It allows you to configure how the actual traffic is going to be handled. An example of this, any of you guys using VoIP, voice over IP? Okay, cool, a couple of you. The VoIP, essentially the same pipe, the same piece of wire that carries your internet data and your computer data also carries your voice. Well, here's the challenge. All data across these are broken down into little discrete packets. Even if it sounds like a voice, that's absolutely fine, but it's still broken down into little packets. And the issue is if the connection isn't very fast, then the packets come slower. You have a slow website. If the packets get lost and they're critical data, it'll ask for them to be resent in the background. slow website. If a voice it's coming across and it's bad, we can't exactly have a slow phone connection. It degrades. The quality comes down. You actually hear the pops, the drop signals, all that kind of thing. You have to have good connectivity. Managed switches and routers and other devices allow you to prioritize so that stuff that's coming across that's voice it'll pay more attention to that data and will make sure that data goes cleanly. Older switches don't necessarily have that or can't tell you if there's a problem with that. And then also virtual and LAN routing and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. And that would be where if you had like a company where you wanted to actually segregate the data so that this network was over here, this network was over here, and things along those lines. And by the way, the prices haven't changed. The prices haven't changed. Now, have they gone down? They really, in my opinion, they haven't gone down as much as the capability has skyrocketed. You can get cheaper or lower cost devices if you want to, but from a budgeting standpoint, I would say stick with the same numbers, and you're just going to get a lot more bang for the buck. And then firewalls and routers. Again, when you wanted to have remote connectivity was we can try to make that work, and hopefully it will, or you're going to have very big ticket costs to do that. Now, no, a remote access to your network it's a given, or it should be. As far as the technology goes, security layers have been significantly added to and enhanced over the past few years. And the device management, you literally would try things, and if it didn't work, you'd try other things, as far as when you're talking about connectivity. And the sad story of ISA, that was some of Microsoft's attempts to build in some of that functionality into their servers, which they've pretty much given up on. Storage. Our hard drives were smaller, they were slower, they break frequently. When we talk about SANs is where this is an example of putting all your eggs in one basket and watching the basket. This is where you would have a collection of hard drives as its own device. And instead of having disks in all the servers separately, and your servers would then connect to that, they were big ticket items that were totally managed by people who are specialists on that. Now they're very affordable for smaller companies. SSDs, solid state drives. Remember that most hard drives are literally spinning platters. So there is actual physical movement with heads that are going back and forth. It's physical. Processors, memory, SSDs are electronic. So for those devices, we're waiting for electrons to move around. For the physical drives, we're waiting for things to spin. Oh, and I had to put the comment of Dell was stupid. Dell would put out their servers for years where the C drive, which is where the operating system and all that, had, 12 gig? 12 gig of storage, because no one would ever need more than 12 gig on a C drive. Everybody needs more than 12 gig. It's kind of like what Bill Gates said back in the 90s, no one will ever need more than 640K of RAM on a computer. But here's one of the questions. Why is it slow? You remember that metaphor I was talking about where we had the processor, we had the memory, we had the storage? Think of this. If we have a very slow processor, the person reads very slowly, to an outside observer, it's going to be very slow. If the person's a very fast reader but doesn't have much table space, so constantly is going up and getting up and down and switching the books, to an outside observer, very slow. If it turns out that the bookcases are very slow to actually, they're far away, or they're not very well organized, so the person has to get a book over here, a book over here, a book over here just to work on one article, to an outside observer, it's going to be very slow. So you're going to have that anecdotal concept of people saying, my system's slow, to which, from an IT standpoint, without knowing what's going on, our answer is, well, that's a shame, or to try to figure out. So one of the big concepts that has been going on, and this is, again, one of the shameless plugs from our standpoint, know the answer.
So in this particular case, this is a chart of memory available of a workstation that's over a period of a couple of weeks. And you can see how the available memory would just constantly go down significantly. Okay? We can tell that at those points in time, they're running out of memory. And in fact, one spot down in August 12th or so, it pretty much went down to 0. And without going into details and all that kind of thing, absolutely, when it starts going down like that, the system will slow down because it's going to start swapping stuff with the hard drive, caching and paging and all that good fun stuff. Without seeing this, we wouldn't know if it was the CPU, we wouldn't know. But we can look at another chart that would show that the CPU, the reader, is fine. Never broke a sweat because it's waiting for space to be freed up. So one of the biggest challenges is if when we talk about obsolescence, we're simply talking about performance, to say something's slow is not good enough. You need to know why or what is slow. Because this, we can take the anecdotal, which is where the end user tells us, hey, yeah, my workstation was really slow yesterday or day. And we can say, well, okay, yesterday about what time? Oh, it was about 11 o'clock or so. We can then look at these charts and see if there was a particular dip or a spike or whatever. And say, well, here's the resource that was stressed at that point in time. We had one client who we had just brought on to the monitoring. And I was there about a couple weeks after we started, and it was Friday, and it was right around noon. And he got a call from one of his clients. This is probably a couple hundred workstations and several servers. And the client and their end user had said, hey, every Friday the servers slow down, or our applications slow down, and it's getting really ridiculous. Every Friday at noon. And he was like, well, we looked at everything, and everything looks okay. Nobody was happy, because they didn't have a way, because everything looked like it was running fine. We were able to take a look at a couple of the charts that were generated, and literally on one server at noon, we saw CPU utilization spike, and we could see there was one application that spiked on that Friday and the Friday before at noon. And we're able to, based on that, we knew where to look, which is half the battle. And we were able to look and see that someone had accidentally scheduled a job to run on that server for noon instead of midnight. And it was a big job. Okay, meaning the server was going to be occupied. And it was occupied, but it was still running, it was available. So the users still got their stuff, just very slowly. But by just being able to look at a couple of charts, we were able to say, here's where the problem is. Boom, solved. Ended up being a 10-minute job. Now, some of these, and I kind of wrestled with this a little bit, because to call them new stuff is kind of a disservice, because they've been around for years. But now, they're the norm. They're accepted. A couple years ago, I'd say 5 or 6 years ago, you could say, hey, virtualization is an option. And you'd have to sell the concept of virtualization. Now, virtualization is an option, and it's no more and no less of an option than any other. And same thing with cloud. Let's talk about these real briefly. Virtualization is essentially, if you have 3 or 4 servers that are sitting there, the odds are most of them are doing absolutely nothing at any one point in time. Their processors are probably running at about 15 to 20% used. Memory, yeah, maybe a third of it's used. Disk space, probably not doing much at all. But it's just those times where it needs to do something that it ramps up. So you're paying for these 4 servers, you're paying for the electricity because they're all running, you're paying for the maintenance on them, you're paying for the air conditioning to cool them, you're paying for all that stuff for most of the time for it to do nothing. What if you could take one piece of hardware and you had those 4 servers running as programs essentially in that piece of hardware? In which case you've got one set of drives, one motherboard, one, that's running. Then your maintenance costs go down because you don't have 4 servers you're working on one. Your electricity costs go down. Your physical needs go down, all that kind of stuff. And I won't go into beyond that, but just keep that as a concept. That's where virtualization comes in very nicely. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But that's more of a concept of what virtualization is. Cloud. Depending upon what the consultant's selling you, what the cloud is totally all over the bloody place. For all purposes, the cloud is something that's not here. Okay? It's out there. So there's all sorts of different versions of the cloud. There's private cloud where you have your own resources that are off-site, but that you access through the internet. There's public, which is where someone else is providing the services, and all sorts of pieces, parts between them. But the issue is if any of you had a Yahoo email account or a Gmail account or an AOL account or any of those, you were using the cloud because that's where you went to get your email. But now a company can choose to place its resources in the cloud. And in a lot of cases, it has to do with the service that you're looking for. And we'll talk about that in a second. Remote monitoring and management. Again, we'll get back to the new stuff. Don't worry. Is to have services that actually monitor your network and to point out when things are slowing down or to prevent them from slowing down as opposed to responding to them when they happen. So for example, if someone notices over a period of time, let's say this is a workstation, that can then go up to the business and say, workstation XYZ, it's actually running a little bit on the slow side. We may want to spend $40 and double its memory. Because otherwise, the only way you know it's slowing down is if the end user complains. And we may have two end users sitting there, one who has an incredibly beefy system but just likes to complain a lot, and another one who has a very minor system but feels that whatever they've got, they should just be grateful. And without this kind of feedback and this kind of measurement, we're probably going to reward the person who complains more, because otherwise we don't know that stuff is slow. So the monitoring is critical. Social media integration. Last year we just said social media. Now it's integration, meaning that it's one thing I have my Facebook. How does my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my whatever integrate with whatever it is I'm doing? So to use as an example, Outlook, if you're using that for your email, Outlook has the ability to integrate a lot of the social media into your email. So if you get an email from somebody, you open it up, down below it'll also show you whatever their latest social media addings has been. Mobile device integration. Oh boy. 10 years ago, if somebody wanted to, there's a concept, you heard of it, BYOD? Bring your own device. 10 years ago, from an IT perspective, someone wants to bring your own device, fine. You're not getting access to any of my data, but bring it. Enjoy. Why? Because it was a pain to connect it to any data, and there was real security risks, and plus the end user really didn't get that much of a bang for the buck for having it. New approaches. So we've got the network monitor we talked about, antivirus, email, conferencing, collaboration, security, desk, all of these things. There's nothing new here. Okay? Except for the approach. 5, 6 years ago, whatever, you had to buy that. You bought an Exchange server. You bought antivirus software. You bought the collaboration, the conferencing, the whatever. Now, a majority of this, especially for smaller organizations, and I'll say smaller is like 75 or 100 users below. Now, you don't have to make that same level of commitment of purchasing capital expense devices. You can just simply purchase these as services, including hardware, which means you are paying a fee for this service, and at the point in time the service is no longer needed, you stop paying the fee. So if you're using, for example, Office 365, you're paying a monthly fee for your email, for your link conferencing, for your SharePoint, for your Office, actual Office software running on your computer, not web-based. You're paying a monthly fee, so you don't have that $500 purchase it. You don't have this, am I going to pay to upgrade? You get the upgrades. We've removed the investment hurdle. We've removed that every 2 years I have to buy a new version. We've removed that what's my budget for upgrading. We've removed all that. What have we dropped? The one thing we've dropped is we've dropped the ownership. Microsoft, how many of you guys are still running XP, Windows, or Office and Office 2003? Microsoft hates you. Okay? Hates you with every fiber of their being. You specifically. But and from a business standpoint, you made an investment in a really good piece of technology, and you haven't paid them a dime since. But the problem is, it worked, and it still works. So, Microsoft, one of the things they're doing is they're moving to that renewable, every month revenue. So every month they're going to get, instead of getting $500 from you here, they're going to get $10, $20 a month. But now you never have to worry about being out of date. You've got the latest version. So, and Microsoft's just one of them. But a lot of companies are moving towards this. And again, it frees you up from the standpoint of now you have a budget, and now you're not sold on this technology with no other choice. If you decide the technology is going to work for you, you move on. You go to another. So, cool. But it's a business-wise big mindset difference. And the cloud lends itself to this wonderfully. BYOD, bring your own devices. This was a big issue because, again, back in early 2000s, if somebody brought in a device, it really was easy for the IT guy to say, no, you can't use it here. And it was also very hard for the end user to justify, no, my business productivity will be so much higher if I can use my Palm Pilot. Because the Palm Pilot really didn't integrate a lot. Okay, then Apple did that whole iPad thing and iPhone, and then Droids and blah, blah, blah. So now all of a sudden, it's not the case. It's not even remotely the case. Now, a person can bring in the device that they purchased and say, I can access and work with company data if you'll let me, and boy, is my productivity going to soar. Because now I can be at a Starbucks and I can do work because I'm able to connect remotely, or I'm able to do my emails and all that. And IT guys, we really didn't have a good answer for that except for but we're not going to be secure. And companies, a lot of companies have problems with just buying into that security question. A lot of companies are like, but you're going to affect my bottom line if you take this away. So just make sure we're secure, but we got to let them in. So we've got, and I'm just giving a couple of, so we've got these tablets, iPads, Droids, and now the Windows 8. We've got iPhones, Droid, Blackberries, Windows 8. Laptops, we've got people connecting through VPNs. We got people who just bring their laptops from home, plug them in, expect them to work. And then finally, storage. We've got people who are taking their documents and they want to work on them from home. They're going to go ahead and load the documents up in the cloud and then download them at home, which is really cool, because if there's one thing you want, is you want your best producing salesperson who's not happy because the latest commission structure doesn't favor them, so they're not happy, but you really want them to upload his client list up to the cloud so he can go home, download his client list, do whatever he wants to it, and then possibly go to work for your competitor. And the same thing with USB sticks. Just, all of these new technologies create risks of people walking around with your data, access to your applications. As well as the best meaning person can have a Droid or an iPad out there that who knows what else they've installed on it, which could create problems. So, Microsoft's big gamble. This is one of the things where, to me, this has not gotten anywhere near enough press. This is huge, what Microsoft's done. Have any of you actually seen Windows 8? Windows 8, the problem is basically this. Prior to Windows 8, Microsoft did not have an answer to BYOD. Their tablets what's the term? Were lousy. Okay, because it was Windows 7, or worse, Windows XP, which don't really work well with the touch. Their phones, but still had some of the same issues. And iPhones and Droids and all that were just beating them to death. So one of the things that they did was that they went with single interface. Because right now, if you've got an iPhone, and you've got a Droid tablet, and you've got a laptop, you need to know how the iPhone works, the interface for that. You need to have your Droid tablet, you need to know how the interface works for that and the applications. Then you need to know how your Windows 7 device works on your laptop. And probably, for like most of us, you're working with Office documents. Well, Office runs very nicely on a laptop. iPhone, well, okay, there's a couple apps you can do that'll allow you to read some of the Office documents, so that'll help. And then Droid, okay, there's a couple of applications that'll work on some Office documents to a certain degree, but they're different interfaces. So now you're being asked to know 3 different interfaces. And then, okay, but if you're away from all those and you're on the web, you have to know another interface to go, well, it depends on where you put your documents. You may not have access to them. Windows 8. Here's the thing. This, and we're not going to, because we've already had Windows 8 lunch and hours, we've had Office 2013 lunch and hours, all that. But here is a Windows 8 tablet. And this is actually the RT version. It's the Surface. Now, this is for a little bit more. It's actually, and this is where I think Microsoft could have done better. It's about $100 more than the intro price for the iPad. So I think it's $499 for the base unit. The base unit does not come with the keyboard. But this will have, I think, twice the memory and twice the storage. But this is a very distinct interface. But it's very, very very touch sensitive. So it works very nicely. But I can also go into, there's Word. This has Office. The RT Surface tablet has Office built in. You can't buy it without it. So now we don't have a second interface. But the nice thing is, again, that now we have a level of technology from an end user interface perspective where if the person is on their phone, they have access to Office, they have access to the cloud documents. If the person is on an RT tablet, which is essentially the iPad equivalent, they have access to their Office, they have access, and the interface is the same. If they have a full-blown Windows tablet, the RT tablet has a lot more battery life, lower cost, but you can get a full-blown Windows 8 tablet. They have access, it's the same look, it's the same interface. Or if they go laptop, if they go desktop, the same look, the same interface, the same access. So the idea of I will have to, as an end user, I have to learn a different technology for every one of the devices and where I'm at. No, it's one interface, one technology. The idea that from an IT perspective, if we're doing help desk support, that we have to give help desk support to, okay, you've got the iPad, which model? Okay, which additional applications did you purchase from Apple Store, from iStore, whatever, in order to get access to Outlook? What? And until we know those things and we don't know what the heck it is, we can't help you. Here, it's Office. And in the case of the phone and the RT tablets, it's built in there. There's no additional purchase. This creates, so that concept of I'm bringing in all these differing technologies, you don't have to. It's one level. And one of the nice things of Office 2013, if I go in and let's just save, well, look, if I want to open, right out of the gate, it says recent documents, my SharePoint site, my SkyDrive, which is cloud storage, or computer. So the end user doesn't have to know, here's how you configure it to get your SharePoint data. Here's how you configure it to get your SkyDrive. Here's how you, no, it's already in there. And it treats them with the same level of priority, if you will. So from a support standpoint, from a where did you put all that, it's in there. And the nice thing is so I've got my and SkyDrive is essentially kind of like Dropbox, where it's a cloud-based storage that's both local but it's Microsoft's. With Microsoft's Office 365, they will be introducing it to include a 7 gig part of Office 365 SkyDrive storage. So if I'm working on my tablet, either one, I've got both a Windows 8 and a Windows 8 RT tablet, I'm working on a document and I save it to SkyDrive. I come over to my laptop, it's in my SkyDrive and it will be in my recent documents. So for example, here is a note that I did, but I did it on my tablet. But it's in my recent documents on my laptop. It keeps track of what I was working on regardless of where I was working on it. So there's no more of that, oh wait, no, I was working on that from home on this. So I can't have access to it on here. It takes care of that integration automatically. So now instead of we're going to the cloud, no, the cloud comes to you. It's there, it's built in, it's configured. Where did you save it? Well, I'm not sure because I was on this. No, it's there. It's built in. And all of this is available as a service, meaning that you're just paying a monthly fee as opposed to buying something outright. Why is this a big gamble? Because nobody likes Windows 8 on the desktop or laptop yet. The challenge is that this works really nice when I can use my fingers and hands and all that. Not so much if you just have the mouse. It is different. And so I get asked, people ask me questions about whether I should go to Windows 8 or not. Here's my advice. Absolutely. On a tablet, this is fantastic. This is great, it's wonderful. If you have a Windows 8 tablet, then Windows 8 on your desktop or laptop will make sense because you've got the same interface then. You don't have to learn the different ways of doing it. If you don't have a touch-enabled device, because nowadays you can get laptops that are actually touch-enabled. If you don't have that, Windows 8 becomes a little icky. Okay, it's a learning curve you got to get over, but you're not getting the bang for the buck. So my challenge to you, both as company owners as well as individual end users, is if you are doing a significant rollout with a large hurdle already, adding Windows 8 because you're refreshing all your hardware, you're going from XP 2003 to 2010 or 2013 or whatever, then in Windows 8 you're already going to be annoying people because it's brand new stuff. It's not so big a deal. However, if you're not going with some of these devices, I think the Windows 8 is a tough sell. Right? It's good and it works fine, but you're adding some additional hoops that people need to go through that are a little rough. Now, you're not going to have a choice in a couple years because that's going to be the way desktops are. And if you remember, back in 2007, we hated the ribbon on Office. We really, really, really hated the ribbon. I mean, we despise. Now, it's the way we do things. Same thing's going to happen here. Applications. Here's the issue. Applications. So this is something that defines your line of business. This is something that we use that actually helps us provide the goods and services to our customers. All right? One of the things we've noticed is there are a lot of companies who have line of business applications that have not been upgraded in years. Sometimes that's fine, and in some cases it's because we wrote it ourselves and the person who wrote it became a professional bowler, whatever. We have situations where we bought it from a company, they went out of business. We bought it from a company, we haven't had the money to upgrade the light, whatever, but we're stuck. Here's one of the first things I would suggest you do is a narration test. And that's just simply narrate, here are the business steps that we need to go through in order to make something happen. Business steps, very simple. Don't get into the tools and trade that is used to accomplish it. But what should be the steps? And then what's the process? The process should be, essentially a business step should have a process step. Any other process step is waste. Now, am I simplifying? Yes, but it's a good measurement. The problem is in a lot of these cases, the whole idea of let's have let's spend $20,000 for a discovery project where we're going to, those days are gone, relatively speaking, for small, medium companies. Okay, but there are a number of anecdotal ones where if you're honest with the organization and all that, you can do that. So an example, customer calls, places an order. We enter the order in the system, we process it. That's what we do. Well, except for our system really can't handle those orders anymore because we started, it used to be we only had 3 standard sizes. Well, now it's customizable completely, so we don't know what size they're going to order. So our system doesn't handle those, so we have an Excel worksheet that'll break those down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if this, the more you are where it's this discrepancy, the bad news. And the next level you can take this is to, well, where should your business process be? Should a customer have to call you? Can they do it online? Wouldn't it be nice if the customer just filled out a form and boom, it went into your system? So you can actually take that from a here's where we're at to here's where we want to be. Back in the day, Henry Ford, customer can have any color car they want as long as it's black. To a large degree, a lot of companies provided goods and services to their customers with the same mantra. Yeah, you can have it any way you want to as long as it falls under our ability to do it. But we've had to expand dramatically our way of being able to respond to the customer needs. Do we have systems that have done the same for us? We talked about the connectivity. There's good and there's bad for both. And there's wrapping up here. I want to be very clear on something. This is not a sales pitch for here's why you should update everything. All right? This is here's the process that you need to go through to understand the values. Because there are good reasons to stick with the old. Comfort zone. All your end users, this is the way they know how to do it. If there's one thing content people hate, it's change. Internal support. However you're providing support to your organization, and the support could be, ask the person who's been here 2 years longer than you. They're used to supporting the old way. Availability of product. You've got it. You have the product, it's there. It's already up and working. And availability of support. You already know what support you have, so you know what you've got. The problem is, all 4 of those can be the frog in the pot. You don't know how hot is the water right now. The new features. I do not mean the new features that we often see in the demos where they say now you can have a spinning icon up on the top. No, it's new features that allow you. There's 3 things we should be doing as business people. We should be increasing revenue, we should be decreasing cost, or we're maintaining or improving infrastructure. If we're not doing those 3 things, what are we doing? The new features as they relate to that functionality. Faster hardware. And when I say faster hardware, that means 2 things. It means number 1, yes, things happen faster. We used to run this report. We've had situations where we've gone in and this is more application optimization, where a report has run in 20 hours, we go and putz with it, it runs in 4 hours. Okay, that's faster. But the other is that it can do more. It can do more with less. It used to be we could only have 5 users on this and things would get very slow. Now we can have 20, we can have 30. We can expand beyond that, so we can grow, the organization can grow without the complexity of the organization growing. Centralized management, oh boy. There is do more with less. We are all called upon to do that. We either need to service and support more customers with the same resources, or we are going to cut the number of resources and service the same number of customers. As organizations, we're called upon to do that constantly. And one of the biggest things that have been added, aside from all the features and the bells and whistles and all that kind of thing, one of the big features that's been added to IT is the ability to manage larger, more complicated networks without larger, more complicated support structures. Support structures including folks like us. Okay? And I'm not even getting into a 20th century service or good providing customer versus or company versus a 21st century. The whole delivery model has totally changed, whether it's service or manufacturing good. Part of the issue Obsolescence is not it's a given definition. It is up to the organization or individual to decide what's obsolete. And the only thing, if there's one thing that I strongly suggest you take away from this, is that you need to have some good business-oriented conversations about what this stuff means to you before it's forced upon you. Because consultants, we will come in and say, whatever it is you've got, it's obsolete. And it either needs to be managed by us, in which case we'll make it so it's not obsolete, or we need to sell you a new one, in which case it won't be obsolete. And we might come in and say that with the best of intentions and all that, but it totally depends on your organization. And then the strategies change. There's basically three. Let's replace everything with new stuff. Very traumatic, capital expenditure, depending on how you purchase it, all that, but at the end of the day, everybody's got the new stuff. And then let's just milk it out of the equipment and bury it out back, in which case then, when it breaks, we'll replace that piece. Great, and it looks like you're saving money, but not always. If you think about it from the standpoint of we have these biplanes, and we're going to just fix the pieces parts when they fall out. Meanwhile, the other guy just replaced his fleet with jets. Okay, biplanes are only going to go so far so fast, literally and figuratively. And then migrate by reviewing needs and opportunities, which is the best of both worlds. If you know that this is going to change within the organization, review that change within the organization and plan and judge accordingly, in which case you're going to have parts that are going to be at this level or this level. The difference between number 2 and number 3 is here the equipment is telling you when it's time to replace, because when it dies we'll replace it. Here we're going to replace it on our schedule based on opportunity, so the replacement would happen here probably faster than here. But here you're going to have expenditures and planning costs and all that. It looks like the expenses are a little bit higher on this guy, but in actuality, when you include your downtime and your lost opportunity and business cost, this is actually a lot more expensive. Solid state drives, absolutely, incredibly much better performance as far as speed. To give you an idea, these tablets are pretty much solid state drives, and they're booting like within 10 seconds of power on and the like. The problem is cost per capacity. So you can right now get a 2 terabyte traditional drive, Steve, what about $100? Okay, so a regular platter-based drive about 100, 120 bucks, whereas an SSD for the same size you're going to get about 100 gig, maybe. Okay, so just 100 gig versus 20 times that for the same price.
Well, what about the longevity?
The longevity originally, wasn't the longevity for SSD drives really not very good to start with?
They have greatly improved.
Yeah.
We got three or four generations now. Yeah.
Yeah, the first generation was really bad for the SSDs as far as longevity, and the manufacturers even said so. But now not. Yeah, I replaced my laptop with an SSD drive and easily cut, and this is a Windows 7 laptop, easily increased the speed. It just incredibly. So absolutely, SSDs are reliable, in my opinion. It's a question of cost benefit in terms of the storage. And you're finding a lot of business class laptops will actually have both. Yeah, they will have both an SSD drive for the OS and then a traditional drive for storage. Cool. Thank you all very much for
Bob Coppedge, everybody.
Yay.
All right, we've got 2 big giveaways today, Windows 7 Ultimate.